Kia ora, welcome to the Ins and Outs podcast. I'm Jemilah.
I'm Koen, and we're here to have casual and informative conversations about navigating the music industry in Aotearoa.
On this episode, we had a kōrero with Emily Wheatcroft-Snape about the ins and outs of recording music.
Emily is a producer, an engineer, and songwriter who's worked with a range of amazing artists, including Phase Days, Takahu, and Tiny Ruins.
We talked about everything that's involved in the recording process, from how to find the right producer, engineer, and recording space to navigating long studio days and building healthy workplace relationships.
Let's dive into the episode.
All right, thanks for coming in today for this kōrero, Emily. Yeah, we'll kick it off by asking you, what is it that you per se do and how did you get to where you are now?
So I am an audio engineer and producer. I'd say audio engineer first and foremost. But I grew up writing songs, grew up very musical, but in quite like a private way, just like writing my own songs in my room and that kind of thing. Didn't start learning instruments or anything till I was like maybe pre-teens.
Right.
But was, doing lots of poetry and songwriting before then. And then realised I didn't want to be at high school anymore. Went and studied at Mains, did my Bachelor of Audio Engineering and Music Production there, and then started working at Roundhead Studios just before I finished studying, and then worked there for 3 years, and now I work freelance out of a whole bunch of different places. I have my own little studio at Parachute Studios, which I have 4 days a week, and then I work for hire for the big studios around the city. If you want to record, have your band recorded, then I can come in and do that.
Cool. So quite a creative background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reasonably.
Yeah. I mean, if you decided to leave school to go and study at Mains, you must have known from an early age that was like the path that you were sort of keen on exploring.
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to have a career in music. I just wasn't maybe sure which avenue. And I was also dabbling in graphic design at the time and was like, maybe I want to do album art and that kind of thing. But the course at Mains originally was just a year-long course and it was a level 5 course. So it meant I could have gone into university with that qualification if I decided I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then I did it for the year and it became a degree and I was like, oh, well,
sweet.
Guess I found my thing. That was easy.
Yeah. Nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
Take that off.
Yeah.
How did you find transitioning from that to freelancing?
From studio recording to freelancing. I mostly stopped working full-time in the studios just because, I hadn't had that time to just be a human person. I'd kind of, been in high school, been at uni, and then, studio engineering is really intense. And there's not a lot of space for you to, figure out who you are as a person or, discover the world as much because you're just in this one building for over 50 hours a week. And a lot of your priorities around getting good quality work for your clients. So going freelance, the biggest sort of transition's just been the free time. And the ability to kind of pick your own projects, pick your own clients. It is scarier to stand on your own. You have to back yourself a lot more. But also I'm not the best at having a boss or having a manager. So I do really enjoy just doing my own thing too.
Being your own boss.
Yeah.
Love that.
Because you're mostly working as an engineer, but also a producer.
Yeah.
Let's quickly go over the differences there, and maybe also touch on what a mix engineer does, what a master engineer does, and what a recording engineer does. So those three, different types, and how maybe artists reach out to you or to someone who would work well for them. How do you find the right engineer, the right producer, the right, there's a lot to unpack there, but let's
but
just
it's good to go over all the different kinds of engineers.
So I'll explain it in the way that's the very old school scope of what the roles are, because that is what the roles are in their essence. So you've got your recording engineer. Back in the day they were called an engineer because they had to be qualified as an engineer because they were using machinery essentially. It was tape machines and they were building equipment and working with this equipment and they wore lab coats, whereas now you're on your computer a lot of the time, or on Pro Tools, or, you know, you're still using outboard gear. But so that's the person that presses play, they set up the microphones, they basically record everything. You're a recording engineer, audio engineer, recording engineer.
It's in the name.
And like a recording engineer doesn't just music either. Like you could be doing it for podcasts, you could be doing it for like radio, or you could be like a live sound engineer.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's all like similar premise. Then you've got like your producer, who is very much like the creative lead of a project, and classically would also be the person in control of the budget, in control of who the audio engineer is, who the studio is, who the session musicians are, and also is coordinating with the artist to have the creative lead to create the project that the artist is wanting. The producer classically would not be like running the computer or running the tape. They would be essentially just like a taste maker in the studio. They would be coordinating all the people, and they would be making creative decisions. And a lot of that would be informed by engineering, but they would be two separate roles.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And then you've got like your mix engineer. So once everything's recorded, it sounds good in terms of like what the recording engineer's done, but it might not be like fitting well together with everything else. There might be additional changes and additional creative decisions that need to be made for it to sound like the finished song. And so that's what the mix engineer does. So they process all of those individual elements together so that the song is now taking the form of the finished product. And then the mastering engineer basically takes a single audio file that the mix engineer has given them. They process the track so that it is now at the loudness that is needed for it to be on radio or for it to be on Spotify, so the volume. Also, like the dynamic range that is needed, both stylistically and as like tech requirements, and also like changes the tone of the song to be more pleasant or to fit better with the style, and also matches the tone of the songs between multiple songs in a project.
Yeah, like an album or an EP.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time the mastering engineer, like we work in singles a lot these days, but the mastering engineer was classically for an album project, and it would be adjusting all that stuff because the song might just naturally have been mixed a bit quieter, this one might be a bit louder, and then just bringing them all into line so they're more cohesive.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the like individual roles. In a modern context, a lot of producers do all of those things. And your mix engineer probably could also do your mastering as well.
Yeah.
Your producer could also be your engineer. And
common
do
one.
a lot of mixing. But it's good to know those individual elements because it's good for the artist to know what they're actually paying for.
Yeah, totally.
And also, you know, the value of, you know, you might just have one person working on all this stuff and you're like, why do I have to pay you so much? And it's like, I'm actually doing these
4 roles.
four roles.
Yeah.
There's 4 different like professions. Like you could just focus on one.
Totally.
Less so these days, but back in the day for sure.
Yeah, I think especially producer and engineer, those roles often like quite heavily overlap.
Yeah.
Like it's unless you're on a massive project, like most often smaller artists wouldn't have like a different person pressing record as they would have someone creatively influencing their music or creating sounds. Yeah.
But it can be really beneficial even if it's just like you are getting your vocals recorded. Maybe go to an engineer to get those sounding really good and then go back to your producer. Like there are ways to do that in a smaller way. Or you need to get some drums done and you don't want them to just be like MIDI drums. You want them to be real. Then you can go to an engineer to do that and then go back.
Yeah.
You know? So
building blocks. Yeah.
there's still elements in which you can incorporate that. And I think sometimes people don't realise that. They think they just have to stick with their producer the whole time.
Yeah.
But you can be like, we need good recording for this. So we're going to go to someone who has the equipment and the experience to do that.
Can help you sort of know what to ask for almost, like even the opposite. Like if you have producers in your band sort of and you sort of know exactly what you want, you'd be like, well, we actually don't need a producer, we just need an engineer. We just need to go and record everything really nicely. And then we can hand it off to a mix and master engineer. And without knowing the difference between those things, sometimes you just don't even know where to start in terms of who to reach out to.
And I think it's also about managing expectations too.
Yeah.
You know, I was mixing a song and someone said, "Oh, can we change this thing?" And I said, "I'm not your producer.
Yeah.
I'm not
something you can do or
and sometimes it might be like, I might hear a part and be like, I might just add a little synth in there and see what they think.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes there can be that blurred line. They're like, oh, can't you just recomp the vocals for me? And I'm like, I'm your mix engineer.
Yeah.
I don't have all the vocal takes.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually, I don't have all the vocal takes. Like what to send to each person is so important as well.
Yeah.
Like don't send maybe 20 stems to a mastering engineer because that's not what they're doing, you know. So
depending on what it is, you might send like your instrumental and your vocals separately.
Yeah.
If that's what they prefer or whatever. But yeah, mastering engineer is just one.
There is a very clear difference to what you send to your master engineer and your mix engineer, because even your mix engineer, you should be sending like, well, I guess it blurs, but you're ideally sending tidy stems, and that you're having, whether it's yourself or someone before that process, probably your engineer or your producer or someone in the middle who's actually doing the comps and editing that and making that project clean for it to go onto the mix engineer.
Because your mix engineer could do some like vocal tuning and fixing up for you, but they probably shouldn't be doing a huge amount.
No.
Yeah.
And also making sure with what you're sending to your mix engineer is has the production choices on it. So if you've got a delay on your vocals and that's how you hear the vocal sounding, send that delay to your mix engineer. Don't be like, hey, can you recreate this? It's like, why? You've already made it. Like, that's the sound. But then equally, take off your compression.
And your
if it's part of the core sound of the thing, keep it on. If it's just your processing to try and make it sound like it's been mixed, then you take it off.
It's like an effect, of course. If you're sending, say, the voice through like a telephone effect or something, then that's cool. That's an effect. Bounce it out as a separate stem or something like that.
Or if you've got panning, that's like you definitely want the panning like this. If you're like, we just did it, but we're happy for you to decide.
Then
take it off.
Yeah, super concise. That's spot on. So now you know sort of maybe actually how to find the people that work for you that stylistically maybe suit you better than other mix engineers or other producers or other mastering engineers.
And how to figure out like what of those engineers you need, like
for your project.
What you have budget for, what's like absolute must do, and what's like a stylistic choice. Yeah.
I think the first part of that, which people don't think about, is that you want to work with people who have made stuff for other artists that you like, right?
Yeah, sure.
And a really important part of that is that artist actually tagging the people who have worked with them on their social media posts, crediting them somewhere, doing all of that stuff. And I feel like we don't have a massive culture of that. Or maybe not as big as we should.
Yeah.
So the first part, first and foremost, is that everybody should be like really clearly crediting all the people that worked on their stuff, because like that really works for people in my profession. That helps us get a lot of work. And can be really detrimental if you've worked on a really big project and then you don't get credited and you're like, that's hard. So first and foremost, just make sure that you're crediting people, because then it means that other artists, if they're like, I really liked that mix, they're now able to help find your mix engineer. So it's so like looking on social media and that kind of thing, like looking at credits and seeing if you can find those people on songs that you do like. Also just thinking about like looking at the like kind of organizations in New Zealand, and if they have any directories and that kind of thing. And then looking at the websites of studios. So like Parachute, for example, say you wanted to go record there. On their website, they actually have all of their in-house engineers listed on their website.
Yeah,
with a little bio. Yeah. Maybe links to their work.
So instead of just like emailing Parachute and being like, I want to record with you, I want an engineer, and they just give you someone who like, they're all great engineers, so it wouldn't be an issue. But if you wanted to make sure that you got someone that you were really cohesive with, actually spending that time to like look at their website and
doing a bit of homework and making sure that you get the most out of that
and having a realistic budget. Having a realistic budget and being like, okay, if I want to work with that person and they're a little bit more or whatever, maybe we should just push it back 2 weeks and have that money, or a month and have that money. And then with producers, like, once again, like somewhere like Parachute, there's heaps of producers around. So even just emailing them and being like, I'm after a producer, would you recommend people for me to look to?
My style is kind of like this.
Yeah.
Who would work well?
Yeah. Or like they have an Instagram and they'll occasionally do stuff and tag people in it. So it's looking through all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, just doing your research, I guess.
Yeah, doing your research. And then like same with Roundhead, like they have all their engineers on there, and then like places like Big Fan like also have a community of people. So it's really just contacting those places and saying, hey, I'm after someone, could you point me in the right direction? I think that goes a really long way.
And they're humans on the other side of that email or the other side of that phone call.
Yeah. Just like, don't be a punisher and you'll be fine.
And word of mouth is the best recommendation sometimes, is having that conversation with someone who can say, oh, I've worked with this person before and I really liked working with them. Or if you are a little bit more suited to this genre or even this personality type, like I can imagine that you'd probably fit really well with this person. And that can be like a really important thing as well. It's just getting along with somebody.
Yeah, just being part of the scene as well. The more that you're out and going to shows, the more that you run into artists who sound you like and who maybe you can ask them, like, hey, who did you work with?
And taking your time. There's a lot of people that, and I mean, I'm partial to this too. You get really excited about an idea and you want to go record it now, so you just email the first person you think of. But like actually taking the time to find the right person, to like go out to gigs and stuff, it makes a difference. You know, I do sometimes get just like kind of cold emails through my website that'll be like, hi, I want to make a thing. And it's like they don't really know anything about me, or they don't know even what they want. And it's like 9 times out of 10 those sessions just don't work out because there's not that thought put behind it from their end of like, is this even the right fit? Like they think, oh, you can just kind of go with anyone and like make it happen.
And that's not even going to work out for the benefit of the artist, because they're not going to get the like quality of end products that they would have got if they just waited a bit longer.
It's like totally. Lose. All right, so do the research and reach out to the right people. Like, take your time. That's great.
For sure. And I think for me that like the next thing that comes into my mind, because we talked a lot about spaces and finding like a studio and then them having a directory of people. But what if you like have a song in you, maybe this is like your first song, you know, you haven't had experience with recording in a place or with people before, and you're like, okay, where do I even start? Like I have some concept of some studios that exist, but I don't really know which ones are right for me. How do you figure out where to go?
So essentially this first song is going to be a sacrificial song.
Oh yeah,
you have to just accept that.
It's true.
Because you need to just have your first sacrificial song where you do all your learning. So do research, like kind of look into the studios. Don't like put all these expectations on those people either, because they don't know you either. So you might say, okay, I'm going to get in touch with Big Fan about recording there. And, you know, if it's just you and a guitar and you're like, I want a whole band on this, like that's great. But like, don't be putting pressure on the studio to be finding a whole band for you and like organising all this stuff, because they're people too, and that's not really how it works. But just being like, I'm going to book in a day with an engineer and or a producer, and we're just going to record the song, and I'm going to figure out how it works. But for me, that's like the best way to do it. Just book in a day, have your sacrificial song, and just do it. And the stuff that you'll learn from that will allow you to work towards what you want your final product to be. But you can't just like do that final product straight off the bat.
In a day.
No. You can't do it in a day. And like a lot of the time, it's hard to do it the first time if you don't already have that community around you. You know? If you're like a band, you know, everyone plays their instruments and stuff, it's like a little bit different. But even then, it's like you might get into the studio and be like, oh, we've actually never played to a click track before. We've never fully figured out our parts before. And, you know, this day of recording is harder than we thought it was going to be.
That's actually a really good thing to mention as well. So, like, before diving into the studio, because that's a commitment, let's quickly talk about what to have in your mind about how far your song is, how final maybe your song is, or while maybe still leaving some room for studio magic, and striking a balance there so that you can make the day as efficient as possible, because you're making use of an expensive space. It is. Sure. It's a beautiful, expensive space. What kind of mindset is good to have before you jump into the studio?
And just like even just practical things ready to
totally
make the most of that space. Like, what can you do to prepare yourself?
Like, it's so funny because you do like so much like music theory in high school or whatever, and then you come into the real world and then you like forget about it. But it's like, what key is your song in? What's the tempo? Make sure your basic structure is completed. Make sure your lyrics are there. And if you can play your song to all those things, then you're like good to go. Yeah. Really.
Right. Because you can't really expect the recording engineer
to be like,
to
we're
pick
in
up
C.
on like, this is the key, and sounds like this is the tempo.
Yeah.
And even just
like they can, but like,
of course, but it's extra time.
Yeah.
It's
even just
time.
practicing to a click track in your bedroom.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
And then when you go in the studio, you've already done your like 100 takes of being confused, and then you just need 5 and you're underway. So that takes way less time.
Totally. And it's just like, especially in a band. Hey guys,
totally.
we all know we're in D, right?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, your bassist is like, ooh.
It's not C sharp.
Yeah. For sure.
And you'd be surprised, like if you can, like invite your engineer to like the rehearsal before.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great idea.
To the rehearsal before.
That's a great goal. Yeah.
And then you can like mitigate some of that. And there might be like a little extra payment you have to give them or whatever.
Yeah.
But that can save a lot of time in the studio.
Definitely.
Yes, because they can sort of
get an idea and
just live in their brain for
or even just making sure you email them before you go into studio and saying, this is what we'll be recording. Yeah. This is what we want to achieve. This is our tempo.
Yeah, even a demo
of sound we're wanting.
Recorded it on your phone, or if you do have a little bit of knowledge of a DAW and you've kind of like laid down a rough idea of a song, then that can help, and that person can go, okay, cool, and now I even know what it sounds like, and like the whole entire structure of the song, and I can already like imagine and even prepare their session, like they can, you know, not that they're expected to do that, but they can have some time in their mind of going, okay, so I understand now, like what instruments are in the song and all that kind of stuff.
And I very much prefer walking into a work day knowing what I'm doing.
Yes.
As opposed to just me rocking up and waiting for people to show up and being like, well, I have no idea what I've got in store for myself.
Even that conversation
all this time I could have been setting up drum mics because I knew that we were recording drums.
So true.
Just making it's making your money go along a bit further if you do that. Because homework, more research.
Yeah, that time in the studio is super precious, and you want to use it valuably, but you also don't want to place any pressure on that time when you're in the studio. You sort of want to like let it fold out.
You want it to be easy.
Exactly, and like easy and flow from one thing to the other. So you know, if you're going to put any, not pressure on yourself, but if you're going to put any like logical things in place and logistical things, you should try and do that before you're in the studio, so that when you go into the studio, you can just be chill and relaxed and in that creative space,
as opposed to sort of being like, oh yeah, can you tap out the tempo while we play it, and is the bridge here, or how many chorus repeats are there, were we going to do a fill into that, and then suddenly it becomes so much harder than it needed to be.
Exactly, and so much more time consuming.
And also, like, I call it a sacrificial song. That doesn't mean you can't release it and it can't be good, but you have to come at it with the mentality of like, we're going to be learning some stuff.
You're going to get better from there.
We're probably
but you're constantly learning as well, you know, constantly.
And we're probably going to be spending a little bit more money on this song than we will on other ones.
Totally.
Because you have to just spend them, like, have enough time.
How do you, once you've like maybe found those things, like a studio or an engineer or a producer, how would you say is the most like best way to reach out to those people? Get in touch.
I mean, if you're booking into like a big studio, you just say, hey, can I book in some time? It's pretty like straightforward. Yeah.
Totally.
For a producer, because like a producer is more of like a partnership. Which I think sometimes people don't fully realize that you're entering into a creative partnership. So you're more likely to, you're probably wanting to maybe like write up a contract or something with them. You're probably wanting to get to know them a little bit more as a person, make sure it's a good creative collaboration that's happening. So reaching out to them saying, hey, I want to, you know, collaborate with you. I want you to be like produce on this project or whatever. An engineer is much more of like a commodity.
Yeah.
Sure.
He's paying for a service.
Yeah, totally. Whereas a producer is more of a collaboration. Tends to cost more because they're spending more time and doing more things.
Yeah, maybe you want to grab a coffee with that person beforehand and sort of
get
to know who they are.
Get to know them.
Get to know them.
Yeah.
It's really hard to just
dive headfirst into something huge, like you are writing together, or like even maybe not writing obviously from scratch all the time, but you are molding maybe this one idea of a song or a pretty fleshed out song into its final product often, and that can look very different.
Yeah, you're spending a lot of time in the same room as well, so you want to get along with that person. If you have like really big, like drastic creative differences or like personality differences, that might be really challenging.
And have the same goals.
Yeah.
Love that.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into that and maybe what people can expect from why it's important and what people can expect from, you know, royalty splits and points and all that jazz.
So like money for each role is different. Once again, it's about like what kind of collaboration are they doing. But like, so for like your recording engineer, for example, it's generally just like a day rate or a project rate. You don't tend to give them royalties unless they're like very involved, and that's like a unique circumstance. It's normally a day rate, and it might be like a reasonably high amount per hour because it is just a day rate.
Yeah.
And then like your mastering engineer, same sort of thing. It's normally just like for your song or for your album.
Yeah, like a one-off fee.
Yeah, it's a one-off fee. So more of like a project fee as opposed to a time thing. Your mix engineer is also normally just like a song or a project fee. Sometimes I charge a time fee if it's more like a live session or something like that, where I'm not mixing as in such a detailed way as like a single for a song, but the live session might be 45 minutes, so it will take me time. But generally it will just be like a song or a project fee. Mix engineers can sometimes get a split of royalty for the recording of the song itself, because sometimes mix engineers can make creative decisions. That's not a massive norm in New Zealand, but as you kind of go up the rung in terms of like being with a label and working with international mix engineers and overseas, that is a more commonplace thing for you to get like points on a song, for them to get points on a song, which is like a royalty cut from the recording of the song.
Yeah, only particularly the, just to separate that, that's not the songwriting royalties, that's the recorded
the recording.
Cool. But that conversation is probably going to be something that like you solely aren't potentially responsible for bringing up. Like if you're getting to the point where you're working with those labels and international artists, it's likely that is going to be introduced into that. Like,
when you approach the mix engineer, they will tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it could be that they start doing stuff and you ask things of them and they say, okay, I can do that, but I would expect like
this.
From it. And that's also where you'd have like a mix engineer contract as well. So it's less common to have like a recording engineer and a mastering engineer like contract. Unless for recording it was like, I want you to do 40 days. I'd probably get a contract.
Fair enough.
Because there's just so much money involved. But and then for mix engineer, you might have a contract for that, and there might be royalties, but not as common in New Zealand.
Sure.
Producers are then like a completely different kettle of fish because it is like creative skills a lot of the time. And so if a producer's like controlling the creative outcome of the song, then it's understandable that they should then get a certain amount of money that the song makes. And so you mentioned the two different royalties. So there's like the songwriting royalties, which is like the lyrics and the music, and then there's the recording royalties. The producer tends to get a cut of the recording royalties because they've helped shape the recording. And then if the producer has also contributed to parts of the songwriting, so let's change around this part of the structure, let's change this lyric, what about this one? Then you should also be discussing with them about doing a songwriting split with them in terms of like they should get some songwriting royalty as well. Producers also tend to do project fees. They might do time, but that would be a bit finicky because you know, when it's creative stuff, you spend a lot of time just thinking about it.
So true.
And how do you charge for that? But also, like, producers would tend to have like a slightly higher rate because of that. And they also, some modern producers, like, you might write a song with them and they'll produce it to a certain level and charge for that, but then to finish it might be a different fee.
Yeah, sure.
Depending on what you're doing, because you might get it to that certain demo level and then take it to someone else. To finish it, or you could take it to that same person to finish it. So it can get a little bit complicated in that regard.
Yeah, sure.
But just like being really open with people about that. When I work with people as a producer, I kind of prefer to do it where we agree on like the recording split. I tend to tell artists, like, unless you're getting 1 million streams, don't worry about paying me out for it. And we have a contract in place so that if suddenly they get picked up by a label and they become an international superstar, I'm going to be getting a little bit of money. But if you're getting like a $10 royalty from Recorded Music New Zealand, don't need to send me my 50 cents. We've all been there. I tend to work with artists who have already written their songs. So I'm kind of a bit more of an editorial producer in terms of like, you get your songs to a good point and then I'm going to elevate them to be finished.
Cool.
Is how I work.
Yeah, nice.
That's a much better way of working for me. Not a super modern producer style.
Producer has a lot of course.
So many nuances.
Yes. It's a word that gets thrown around a little bit. It's an easy label to slap on a lot of things. But it's really cool how you say an editorial producer. It's like, look, probably not going to songwrite heaps with you, but I'm happy to add more things to it.
I'll tell you when your lyrics are shit.
Sure. Rather than writing it from scratch, which is also producing. Then almost producing is more like someone who's part of the band playing an instrument. But instead of, maybe...
And that
maybe
can be songwriting too.
Yeah, totally.
And that can be like a real different stage of the process as well. Like a more editorial producer can come in like later in a project because that song is already like mostly completed and you're just adding to it. Whereas if you're working with a producer like in a strong partnership, then you're wanting to have that sort of understanding from earlier on in the project if they're going to be like working on the creation of the songs from the development.
I'm very much like, I like to sort of harness the skills that people have and utilize them to have the best outcome.
To their best ability.
And like, I know that like, I'm not actually the best at like getting on the MIDI instrument and making an idea happen. But I can add layers and I can, once I've heard what you're going for, I can then hear those extra parts to put in. So, and that's taken a while for me to learn that. But I say all that to say that in terms of like a songwriting royalty, I kind of say to an artist, either every time I make a songwriting change to your song you've already written, we have to discuss if I get a songwriting split. Or we just say across the board, I'll get like a 5% on everything, and then we can just do whatever we want in terms of those changes. And each artist has a different sort of opinion of that and what they want to do. But like that seems to work really well for me. And it's good to have those discussions like right at the start of the relationship too.
Yeah. Make it really clear.
Yeah. So when I first start working with someone, I'm like, I'll probably get this percentage of the recording one. And then for the songwriting, either it's per song as each change is made, or it's just like a flat rate that I kind of go on.
And that just like really diminishes having any like relational problems down the line, any like you have a sort of tricky, maybe kind of awkward conversation at the beginning to like eliminate a really uncomfortable conversation down the line is the way that I sort of see it.
I feel like customer service really helped me for that conversation.
It's so
being like being like a supervisor and being like, I'm really sorry you can't get this refund because of this. Like once you're good at having that conversation with people, saying, hey, I need this royalty split is not that difficult.
And like it's becoming more sort of widely known, which is really awesome. And
it's not a negative thing.
And you're not asking for anything crazy. It's like, look, I have these really cool ideas that I want to bring to this song, but I want to be acknowledged for them.
Well, in a sense, like you're not even really asking for anything. You're saying like, I have this thing that you can have if you want.
Yeah.
You're not even saying like, can I? You're saying like, do you want me to or do you not want me to?
Yeah.
Because you're also happy to be like, okay, you don't want me to? Cool. I'll just do
That's cool.
But then it's like, I can't do my job if I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
and like part of my payment is to get the royalties. But
and artists will also, like, the reason they've come to you is because they probably should have done their research, figured out that they like what you do, figured out that their stuff fits with your stuff, and want your opinion and like personal inflection on the song. So most artists will be like, yeah, I do want you to give me feedback. Like I think you probably should in a general sense, because you know, why would you not want to have like the opportunity to make your song go that extra step like at that stage in the process?
And it is really important to do it at the start while everyone still has good intentions.
Yes.
Not still has good intentions, but when you're at the start of the project, everyone has good intentions towards the project. They're like, I want it to do well, I want us to work together, it's going to be really good, so yes, let's sign that contract. And it's not being like, we're going to sign the contract in case you become an asshole. It's like, let's just sign it while we all have good intentions, because we don't know what the future brings, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone signs it at that point when they're all happy, and most of the time you never even look back at the contract.
Yeah.
But when the song does make $1 million, there's no awkward, well, I came up with that guitar riff, so...
and it's also like, if things fall apart for whatever reason, you've got something to lean back on.
Yeah. Or if even if someone wants to put your song on like a movie, and they're like, hey, we want to put your song on a project, can you give me the royalty splits by tomorrow?
Yeah.
And if you haven't had that conversation, like that does happen quite fast.
And with all of that stuff, like just... once you've kind of got it in a place where it could be submitted for syncs, go to all your co-writers and be like, can I just get like a blanket sign-off, please? Or whatever it is, or say, you know, is there any reason why you wouldn't give permission, so that if that kind of thing comes up, I'll double check with you, otherwise it's fine. Like having those conversations with people.
It is quite a simple question. It is, you know, it often seems more awkward of a conversation than it is, because really, you're just saying like, hey, like, I want the song to do really well, and let's just have these things in place so that it can have unlock its full potential.
And then you can like register them with APRA with those same royalty splits, and that's verified, and everyone's already like sort of signed off on that or has awareness of that, and it's important to do.
I don't know. I think I probably tend to like over give people splits on like my personal music.
Sure.
But because like I can't always pay people super well to work on my stuff, so I give them a royalty split. And you know, sometimes that means I'm like, wow, like that person's got quite a big split on my song, but then I'm like, but how great would it be if the song did do well and we all made money off it?
Yeah, totally. And like having an awareness of like, if you didn't have that person involved, you might not even be able to get to do what you need to do at this stage. If you don't, often you are like, okay, I don't have a massive budget and I still want to do this project. So if someone is going to even just help me out and I can give them some royalty splits, even if they do end up getting more down the line than I would have paid them, at that moment you might not be able to pay them. And that might just be what gets the project off the ground in the first place.
So when you are working as a producer and you're essentially a new core member of this either group or song that you're working on, a project that you're working on, how do you make sure that you nurture a good energy in the room? And actually, if it's a bad energy in the room, if you feel weird vibes, let's call them vibes, how do you navigate that? Like that, creating a good vibe and navigating a bad vibe.
I'll say bad vibes, 50% of the time is blood sugar. So tick that off your list first and foremost. Everybody, let's go get a snack. Who needs a coffee? The other 25% of the time is shit's happening in people's lives. And you can't do a whole lot about that. The other 25% of the time is no man's land and it's really difficult to navigate. But nurturing that energy in the room depends, it changes per room. It's really about observing the people that are there. Why are they there? You know, who cares more than others? The power dynamics of everyone else in the room. Is there a push and a pull? Is there people that everyone is leaning towards? Is there no one in charge? Do they just want me to be in charge? And then there's also kind of like who makes the good decisions? And what is their personality like? Kind of molding. You do have to kind of mold your personality and how you socialize to what they need. Also taking your own needs into account. I have started to become a little bit more like, I'm going for a walk. I'm going to go eat some food. Being very purposeful about meeting my needs too.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a bit cranky, it's not good for anyone.
Yeah, it's true.
So it really is like that kind of observational thing, and then just like really tailoring your approach to each situation. There's no hard or fast rules for that.
Yeah.
You'll find like it's funny because people always think of engineers especially as like very like socially awkward people. But they're actually very like socially intelligent people. They kind of can read a room quite well.
Yeah, because they're just like they're doing things and observing people.
That's what they're probably doing every day. It's just observing,
I think if everyone also did a better job at knowing what they need. Like
it's true.
That's like something that can go out. It's like you know yourself better than anyone else does, better than anyone in your band, better than anyone that you're working with. You know how regularly you need to eat and whether you need a coffee in the afternoon, know those things and try not to forget those things when you go into a studio. Like if you go into a studio and it's a whole day being like, okay, guys, I'm sorry that it's the middle of something, but I really need to go and eat something because I'm fading. I think it's really good that you can do that. And I think that if everyone in the room could do that, then it makes a massive difference to that space.
For sure.
Like everyone almost like, as you ask that question, I'm like, maybe the answer is if everyone can try and nurture their own space, their own head space, then that's going to benefit.
But it's true. Like some people are
environment.
having shit days and you just can't, see that before they are in the room. And it is often a stressful, maybe there's time pressure of the release or whatever. So that's true.
The other things to like take into account is just like, what do I reckon their social background is? Where do I think they're coming from? What do I think their worldview is? And because especially if you're like a studio engineer, you don't always necessarily pick your clients. You might just kind of turn up and there'll be people. So being like, what do I reckon their world experience is? A group of like older men from the North Shore are going to act completely differently to like a group of young women from West Auckland. Like, it's going to like, be really different. So like observing all of that stuff. And then also, getting a vibe for what their experience is. What do they need help with? Like when I work with like Play It Strange kids, for example, I make sure to like over-explain how the studio works to them. I'm like, this is a microphone. I tell them about the insides of the microphone. I'm like, this is how it works. Have you done kinetic energy and physics yet? Like, let's, like doing all of that stuff to make them more comfortable in the studio environment.
Yeah.
Whereas other people are like, I've done recording before and try to tell me what to do.
That's so sweet.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
But, you kind of have to manage that as well. Sometimes I have to like get a little bit of dominance on and be like, cool.
I know what I'm doing.
I also know what I'm doing.
Thanks.
And sometimes, it's more like, well, do you want to help me then? Do you want to be my, assistant for the day, It really, really depends.
Yeah.
But I think it just, to me, that just shows the like importance of being someone who is aware of that, because it's going to be ever change, like an adaptable person.
Yeah. There's a lot of soft skills behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's definitely the like old school engineer who just like would be cranky and you just deal with them. These days I think the style is a little bit different. People want to work with someone who they enjoy working with.
Yes. And it's cool that they can. There's quite a plethora to choose from now, which is really awesome.
Yeah. Do you have any like thoughts, feelings, pieces of advice, like anything you would like to share that we haven't already discussed?
I have two things to advertise. First one is the Music Producers Guild of New Zealand. Basically for producers in New Zealand, it doesn't matter if you're like a paid producer or you just like the idea of producing or you're learning. They have a free tier where you can be signed up to their newsletter and then just get support from them. You're like, hey, I'm having this issue with this thing. They can help you out with that. Or they have the paid tier where you can get like contracts that are worth like thousands of dollars tailored to you. You can get like discounts for stuff. You can get like exclusive workshops. And then also, the newsletter and the help. And like the guild is really supposed to be there to help advocate for producers and audio engineers in New Zealand. To be like,
awesome.
This is the type of pay we should be expecting. We're wanting everyone to be signing contracts for things. We're wanting people to be getting correct royalties. And also setting standards of behaviour for engineers and producers and that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah, that's great.
So sign up to it. It's just mpgnz.co.nz. Because I think it's a really cool resource that we're building within the industry. The second one is that the percentage of women audio engineers and producers is really low.
Super low.
Less than 10%. I think it's around 5%, but it changes depending what you read. And I've created this initiative called the Record Enable Initiative, which is basically trying to help women and non-binary people create sustainable careers in either audio engineering and or production.
Cool.
And so that is for people who already know they want to make money in that field in some way. It's not like a fully beginner program. Because I think like you've got like Girls Rock, which helps people. You've got the Ignite program, which helps people. You've got universities. And then you've got people who are working in it. And there's this like weird little gap where it's like there's people who are keen and want to get into it. But because it's a very male-dominated field, it can feel very intimidating and like you can't get much help. Totally. And then it's also a hard field to get into in general.
Yeah.
So
it's very competitive.
Just like creating workshops and like small programs to really kind of help people in that area get into the field more.
Yeah.
So that's called Record Enable.
Cool.
Yeah. Amazing.
Love
MPG,
that.
Record Enable.
Yes.
Super cool.
I think I just made me sort of realize that we haven't really spoken much on the producer side of the equation. But I think most of what we talked about is like reversible. Like as a producer, if you're like an up-and-coming producer, I'm sure that it's a similar, like you can also potentially reach out to an artist that you like and be like,
for
hey,
sure.
Yeah.
I think you're cool. I want to work together.
Exactly. So I think most of the principles are similar, even though it's a different. Even engineers, like we've had engineers say, "Oh, I liked working with you. I'd be keen to work with you guys again. But let me know if you've got projects coming up." So I guess just putting it out there that if you are listening and are on the other side, that the same things apply. You don't have to just sit back and wait for artists to find you. You can also like reach out. Yeah.
And get support from other producers who are around as well. Get in with not get in with the studios necessarily, but just make sure they know who you are, and you know what they're up to, and just get in with that recording community.
It's quite a core part of the old music industry.
So. Definitely. Well, you can't really do much without a space unless you've got a cool home studio. Yeah.
Which is also equally expensive.
Yeah,
exactly.
Plus you need to know what you're doing. So.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with that, let's wrap up and just say thanks so much, Emily, for coming and speaking. It's so cool to pick your brain on all of these things, and hopefully for people listening as well. And if you do have any burning questions aside from the ones that we hopefully answered, shoot us a message, reach out to Emily. It's super easy. We're all human, so just get in touch.
We'll get back to you.